Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful to Thee that we are able to come together as Thy children to study from Thy Word and to learn more of Thee, how we may better serve Thee in this life. We pray, Father, that would forgive our sins and help us as we study together. That would be with Brother John as he directs our minds through this study. May we benefit from it. May we learn from it and learn to teach others. That our service today might be profitable. These things we pray in the name of Jesus, our Savior. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Making sure we've got everything going as needs be. Okay. Very good. All right, well, before we step into chapter 6, let's take a few minutes and we'll review through the questions of Nehemiah chapter 5 here. And let's see. Question number 1, explain the outcry of the people as described in verses 1 through 5. Well, why were the people upset? Why were they crying out to Nehemiah?
Their brethren had put so many burdens on them. Well, I mean, that's in a nutshell. There's a lot to say there.
That's true. The major sin, if you would, was the usury, the charging them interest to the level they were on the what they had loaned them just in order to survive.
To confiscation.
What's that?
To confiscation.
Yes, to the point of confiscation. That's exactly right there. They were taking advantage of those who didn't have to be taken advantage of. I mean, if you think about it. Number 2, with what sin did Nehemiah charge the nobles and the rulers? Usury. You'll notice there in verse 7, each of you is exacting usury from his brother. You know, there's the charge. Question number 3, what was Nehemiah willing to do to put a stop to the usury?
Called the priest and took on an oath of them that they should do as they promised.
Okay. But what else? Of Nehemiah's own accord, what was he willing to do? He's willing to give of his own.
Oh.
He was going to go about and, let's see, he says there, verse 10 there, I also with my brethren, my servants, am lending them money and grain. Well, please let us stop this usury. He was going to step in to help them so they can have their land back and their property back that they had essentially mortgaged. Number 4, what did Nehemiah say after shaking out the fold of his garment?
God will shake it, verse 12, verse 13.
That's right. So may God shake out each man from his house and from his property who does not perform this promise. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. Number 5, how long did Nehemiah and his brothers not eat the governor's provisions?
12 years.
For 12 years, yeah. For the time that he served as governor. That's exactly right. Number 6, according there to verse 15, how is Nehemiah's reign as governor different from those who preceded him?
Burdens on people, and he didn't do that.
That's right. He basically lived off what he and those of his household and those who were there needed. He didn't take the extra that he could have taken or that the predecessors had taken. Exactly. He was not going to make the burden harder on them. How many, number 7 there, how many Jews and rulers sat around Nehemiah's table? Yeah, look there in verse 17. And at my table were 150 Jews and rulers, besides those who came to us from the nations around us. And then number 8, why did Nehemiah not demand the governor's provisions? Exactly. Notice there he says in verse, the latter part of 18, yet in spite of this I did not demand the governor's provision because the bondage was heavy on the people. Okay, any other thoughts?
You kind of see a Rehoboam story there as far as when the older men encouraged Rehoboam to listen to the people and lighten the load and all that. And of course he refused and it thus divided the kingdom. But Nehemiah seems to have seen the burden be so heavy and to take it upon himself, kind of like a Barnabas, I'm going to help my brethren.
That is a good contrast there of a comparison to make with this. And what Rhonda was referencing there was when Solomon sinned and God divided the nations. Solomon's son Rehoboam, he was given the throne, and the older advisors, those who would have counseled Solomon, said you need to be kind to the people, rule the people with mercy, etc., etc. Those of his contemporaries, the younger men of his age and category, said, no, you've got to be hard, and you've got to, punish them with scorpions. You've got to be, lay the law down, you might say, and just be hard on them. Well, he listened to those, and as a result, 10 of the tribes says, no, thank you, and they abdicated. Well, not the right word, but they left. And Jeroboam was the one that God said, all right, you'll have these 10 tribes now. That's right. All right, any thoughts?
Well, Nehemiah used a good example of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Set an example.
He did. He set a good example, too. Yeah, that's right.
And isn't it sad that brethren would do brethren like that?
Well, it is.
It's really, really sad.
Thing is, can it still happen today?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes, what's the old expression about business and family?
Don't mix.
Yeah. Someone may say, there's a financial individual by the name of Dave Ramsey. One of the biggest things he always says, don't loan money to family. Give them the money, but don't loan it to them. Because when you loan it to them, it will create a problem. Because depending on their personality, they'll think, well, it's mom and dad, I don't have to pay them back really quick. Or it's my uncle, he's got a lot of money, he really doesn't care. And it creates a lot of hardship. And so he says, you don't loan it, you just give it to them. And but the point is sometimes family and business don't always mix. And so in something like this, what they should have done is simply give the people what they needed. Give them an opportunity to pay it back, but not charge them interest, not make the burden heavier. These are their brethren. They should have loved them. Just simply said, here, take this, and you'll be provided for. Any other thoughts?
It just shows the condition of their hearts.
Yes.
They didn't have any mercy for the poor and those that were struggling to make a living.
That's right. And that's what we go back to, why they were in captivity, or at least one of the reasons in the first place where they went, Babylonian captivity. It's because of the way they were treating the poor, the widows, and those who were unable to provide for themselves. All right, any other thoughts? All right, let's turn now to Nehemiah chapter 6. Nehemiah chapter 6. Okay. Now, as we begin this particular section here, we find that there is essentially a conspiracy, you might say, against Nehemiah. An opposition is going to be presented here, a possible compromise, I should say, being presented here. And it's going to be something that, of course, is not going to be acceptable, not whatsoever. So what we'd like to do there, start in chapter 6, and let's start in the back this time, Rhonda. If you would, go ahead and read for us the first 4 verses.
Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there were no breaks left in it, though at the time I had not hung the doors and the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, Come, let us meet together among the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to me to do harm. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? But they sent me this message 4 times, and I answered them in the same manner.
Okay. Let's go back up to verse 1 here for a moment. And they tried their best to put a stop to the building of this wall. They've threatened, they've done this, they've done that. And as a result, were they successful in hindering the rebuilding of the wall? No. And you think about it, he says, Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and rest of the enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there were no breaks left in it. Now, at this point, he says there was no breaks left in the wall, but what had he not yet fully completed?
The doors and gates.
Yeah, hadn't yet hung the doors and the gates there. So, based upon this verse right here, depending on how we want to look at the description there, it may be that, and we talked about some of the events in the previous chapter taking place within the 52-day period that the wall was rebuilding. At this point, if the 52-day building completion time frame did not include the hanging of the doors, then this could be outside of it. If it did include the hanging of the doors, then what's happening is still within that same 52-day
The
time.
accurate translation is that it did not include hanging all the doors, because some of the doors were hung, if you go back. to
As they were building it.
Yeah.
But not all of them.
Right.
More than likely, when he says here, I had not hung the doors and the gates, it could have been the primary gates. The smaller entrances where they could come in were easily fixed, the doors were hung. But it could have been that some of the major gates there needed still to be completed there. But either way, whether, depending on how you look at the completion of the walls there, we're looking at a very, not years later is the point that he's making here with this. And that makes sense, because here they're looking at it, hey, the walls are completed. We've not been able to stop them, so we need to go to plan B, you might say there. Notice there in verse 2 there, that Sanballat and Geshem, they sent a message to him, saying, come, let us meet together among the villages in the plain of Ono. But what was their intent? Mischief, to do harm. Did Nehemiah know this?
Yes.
Absolutely. He was fully aware of their intent. Come on over here and we're going to see if we can work out a compromise. And Nehemiah, was he willing to go? No, look at verse 3 there. He says, so I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work. What I'm doing is a great work. I cannot come to you, and I will not come to you. Or he should say, why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? Now, look at it from a little bit different angle here for a moment. Would the work have continued had Nehemiah left?
Probably.
Yeah, probably so there. Do you think he was just using it as an excuse so that he wouldn't have to go?
No.
Okay. He really meant it. He was busy doing the Lord's work. He knew it was a trap. Okay. He knew that that's what they had in mind. But as far as he was concerned, there was something far greater, and that was completing the task at hand. And he was not going to leave the work undone. How many times did they try to persuade him to come to them?
4 times.
4 times. And he answered them how? All 4 times. Yeah, the same way. Okay.
And Nehemiah, knowing the history of the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, when their leader Moses was gone for a few days up at the mountain, look how quickly they turned to idolatry. Maybe he was concerned, that if their leader goes astray, disappears for a few days, maybe he was worried about the people.
It could have been.
Keeping them set on the right course.
It could have been. But the way that this is worded here, I would really suspect that he knew, as we say, he knew it was a trap. And so he saw his excuse to them or reasoning to them, what I'm doing is far more important than meeting with you.
That's right.
And almost you might view it as him saying read between the lines, I know what your intentions are. You're just trying to get me away from here. And it's not going to work. This is far more important. Yeah. But that is an interesting point, though. There are instances where leaders in the past, once they were out of the picture, the people would migrate back to a sinful position there. Yeah. Some faster than others. All right, any thoughts?
In verse 2, where it talks about the plain of Ono,
Yes.
this is thought to be in the tribe of Benjamin, which would suggest that the enemies of Nehemiah really found a place where they thought Nehemiah might be willing to come out to them.
Oh, still be in what he might perceive to be safe territory,
Right.
being in the region of Benjamin, that northern area there. That's a very good point. Because that's not where they live. They live Samaria and regions outside of that, and he might not have, in their mindset, he won't suspect anything if we have him to come up here. It's a good point. All right, any other thoughts? All right, let's continue our reading here. And Miss Phyllis, would you mind beginning there in verse 5? And let's read verses 5, 6, and 7, please.
And Sanballat sent his servant to me in the same manner a 5th time, with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, It is reported among the nations, and Gashmu says that You and the Jews are planning to rebel. Therefore, you are rebuilding the wall, and you are to be their king, according to these reports. You have also appointed prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you, a king is in Judah. And now it will be reported to the king according to these reports. So come now, let us take counsel together.
Okay, and Ms. Pat, would you read for us verses 8 and 9?
Then I sent him, saying, no such thing as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. For they all were trying to make us afraid, saying, their hands will be weakened in the work, and it will not be done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands.
Okay. All right, let's step back up here for a moment to verse 5. You know, they made one attempt to try to get to oppose through compromise, trying to get him to stop in hopes of, under the guise of wanting to make a compromise with them. Now they're trying to put a stop to it by essentially slandering. Notice the threat here that they were going to supposedly make before the king there. This is the 5th time. Here comes an open letter. And it was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem says that you and the Jews plan to do what? Yeah, plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, you are rebuilding the wall that you may be their king. So here's their thread of what they're going to tell King Artaxerxes. The message is really this: they're actually rebelling. They're building a wall. Nehemiah's going to be their king. They're going to rebel. They're going to try to take over the area. Artaxerxes, you need to squelch this attempt there. And on top of that, he charges them with having appointed prophets to proclaim concerning Nehemiah at Jerusalem. Now they're saying, and you've also found prophets who would be willing to say there is a king in Judah. Maybe, possibly, they were referring to, maybe they were trying to accuse Nehemiah of making a false claim of fulfillment of prophecy. Because you think about some of the prophecies that had been written regarding, especially that the scepter would not depart from Judah's family till Shiloh comes. Maybe they were referring to prophets saying that Nehemiah was a fulfillment of prophecy, or simply saying the prophets, he was going to hire prophets to claim that he is the king there. Either way, their threat was in verse 7 to report these matters to whom? To the king. So, we need to sit down and talk about this. He's refused the first 4 attempts. Now they're saying, we need to sit down and talk about this. Here's what we're going to tell the king. Come to us. What was his reply, though?
No such thing going on.
Yeah, in other words, you're making it all up. You're inventing it within your heart. None of this is true. So, here's their motivation in verse 9. They were trying to make us afraid. And they said, their hands will be weakened in the work and it will not be done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. What typically will cause work to cease? Fear, okay? Fear, worry, concern. Think about it for a moment. Let's say you've got a big task at hand. And you're going to have to work every day at this for a month, and it's going to require a lot of effort on your part. As long as you stay focused on getting the results accomplished, you're going to be fine. But when you begin to worry, well, what if I don't make it? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if someone comes up to you and says, you know what, you might as well give up, you're no good at this. People are going to reject it, they're not going to like it. Discouragement has a way of slowing us down because it distracts us from the goal in mind. And this is what they were attempting to do. They were hoping that once this message got down there, and it was an open letter. It wasn't simply intended for Nehemiah. It was an open letter, an open threat, you might say. And their hopes were that people would begin to worry about this. Well, what are we going to do? We can't keep up with this. He's going to let Artaxerxes know that we're planning to rebel against him. We can't do this. We've got to stop, Nehemiah. Look what you're getting us into. This is what they were hoping would happen.
But isn't Artaxerxes still with them?
They still have his royal approval. That's exactly right. But Artaxerxes is all the way over in Susa, on the other side of the land beyond the river. He's way over there. And so to get any word from him would take a lot of time. And to get any help from him would take a lot of time. And all they're trying is just an immediate terroristic type method to try to make the people stop. Any thoughts?
That's kind of like a conspiracy theory.
Of a sort, conspiracy. Propaganda. Exactly.
But the message is that Nehemiah concludes that verse 9, with a strong prayer, suggesting that any time we enter into the service of the Lord, or that when we are facing any type of stressful situation, a good prayer goes a long ways.
Exactly. That is exactly right. But the key to that good prayer, and I think Dale's absolutely right with that, is we have to believe it. We have to believe it. I was told a story one time of an individual who was facing a great challenge. And it had gotten to the point where in his trying to understanding of things, he was essentially about to lose his faith. His questioning had brought him to a point that it was at a breaking point. And so he spent time in prayer, praying greatly about it. And lo and behold, the next days that followed, the burden that he held before was not so great any longer. And in my discussion with him, I suggested to him that what happened is at that point he truly trusted in the Lord. It wasn't some empty or vain prayer. It was at a breaking point that he realized he needed to put his trust within the Lord. And once he did that, it redirected his focus. Now, whether or not he stays in that position will be completely up to him, and that's the way it is with us. If we're going to trust in the Lord, it is not, we're not saying that, all of a sudden if I pray to the Lord, He will come down and rearrange our lives so that everything will be perfect as it should be. But when you trust somebody and their message, doesn't things go better for you when you trust the path and you trust the instructions? Because then you know it's worth following.
Thank you, John. I needed that right now. This man in Pampa is having a real struggle, and he doesn't feel like it's a loving congregation. I think maybe he better worry about himself now.
Absolutely. If we take care of ourselves first, and not the selfish way, but if we get ourselves in order first, everything else begins to fall into place because we're doing our part.
Rather, it'll be a loving congregation.
Exactly, and set the example for everybody else. That's right.
I'm going to have to call him back.
That's right.
Well, Sanballat and all them, they attempted at first to discourage the building of the wall.
Right.
And now they're looking to distract them from building the wall. And I kind of think about the devil himself. If he can't discourage you, he's going to surely try to distract you from your goal. And so we need to, stay focused. We have to, otherwise he wins.
What great biblical example is there of someone who began to sink in his faith when he looked away?
I kept thinking of Peter this whole time, taking his eyes off
taking the eyes.
I mean, it's a well-used example, but it is a perfect example.
If only I could remember it all the time.
Our problem is we wear life vests.
Yeah.
So we think we've got, if our faith does waver, we've got something to hold us up there a little bit. We don't realize we're sinking.
Just get entangled.
Yeah, that's a good point. Entanglement is snares of the devil and so forth. Yeah.
What they're trying to do to Nehemiah is everyday life, but he is working through it and doing the right thing. He's showing us the way.
That's right. And this prayer that Dale pointed out, though, although it says, "Now therefore, God, strengthen my hands," it was a personal prayer on his behalf. But would it not have also included the hands of the people?
Yes.
Because they didn't need to be discouraged. They were going to follow him. So if Nehemiah got discouraged, they would get discouraged. But it also, I believe, helped as a prayer for their strength as well. All right, any thoughts? All right, let's continue now with the next section here. And let's start in verse 10. Let's see, Miss Doris, would you mind reading for us verses 10 and 11 of Nehemiah chapter 6?
Oh, here it is. Yeah. Afterward, I came to the house of Shemiah, the son of Deliah. You gave me the worst one.
It's uphill at first, then it'll get better.
You think so?
You got one more.
Afterward, I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of
Mehitabel.
You did this on purpose.
just
I'll
say-
never forgive you.
Just say meaty table.
Meaty table. I like that one. All right, let's go. Let's continue.
Let's see, where was I? Mehitabel, who was a secret informant, and he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. This is horrid.
Mm-hmm. Let's do one more.
Okay, and I said, should such a man as I flee the temple to save his life? I will not go in. Then I perceived that God had not sent him at all. But that I'm sorry, I can't pronounce
Yes. Mm-hmm.
this prophecy against me, because Tobiah and
Sanballat.
Sanballat,
Mm-hmm.
they might reproach me. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Oh no, you
Shouldn't
No,
have
you
read
did
that.
fine.
you did fine. You pronounced very well. You did good. Now let's pause here for a moment and step back up here, and I'm going to try another tactic. Okay. Here they're going to use what we would basically call treachery. Okay. You have an individual who was a secret informer. In other words, who was he truly working for? Exactly. He was working for Tobiah and Sanballat. That's right. So he comes up to Nehemiah. He says, let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, because they are coming to kill you. And they're going to come to kill you by nighttime. So we need to go into the temple and essentially hide. Now, what would this prevent Nehemiah from doing? Working on the wall, on the gates there. Exactly. All right. It would again, and here, okay, he won't go up to Ono to meet him. So let's get him in the temple, and maybe he'll barricade himself in the temple, and then the work won't get done. But I love his response there in verse 11. He says, should such a man as I flee? And who is there such as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. In other words, Nehemiah recognizes that the temple was there to worship God, not for him to cower in, not for him to hide in, and he is not going to flee. Any thoughts? All right, look at verse 12.
He was
Mm-hmm.
a very brave man.
He was, exactly. He had his faith in God, therefore the bravery and courage was as it should be. That's right. That's exactly right. So in verse 12 there, he says, then I perceived, of course, that God had not sent this fella, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Nehemiah was an astute observer of people's behavior. And I have no doubt that the Lord may have also, helped him to know this, but I'm certain that he observed through the mannerisms of this fella that he was not who he claimed, or what he was saying had ulterior motives to it. Gene?
I suspect too that he had learned some things when he was the cupbearer to the king.
That's a good point. Yeah. He had.
About deceit and prophets and treachery and all that sort of thing. Because those things he would have seen being that close to King Artaxerxes.
That's a good point. And you can learn a lot through observing how people handle situations.
Well, the other thing too, if you go back to the first few chapters we looked at as they were building the wall and everything, the one thing they did is they put sentries at each open space.
That's
To
true.
watch for the enemy. So you have to assume here in chapter 6 that even though some of the gates were not installed as of yet, there were sentries there guarding the entranceways. And therefore, for the secret informer to come in and encourage Nehemiah to hide in the temple, Nehemiah knew right off that it was a trick.
Yeah.
Had Nehemiah done that, though, the people probably would have looked at Nehemiah as being a coward and one who was afraid, and so they too would have that same fear, and everything would stop, and that's what the enemy was trying to get accomplished.
That's exactly right. I think that's a very good point. What Waddell, if you didn't hear it, I'm sure you did, is that Nehemiah knew the gates were protected. Even the ones without the gates being hung were protected by the sentries. You know, how could they get in to kill him? Hence, he being aware of the fellow's subterfuge. But I think that's a good point in that as well, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If Nehemiah had gotten scared, the other people would have gotten scared. Had they seen him, because word would have spread quickly. Where's Nehemiah? Well, he's hiding out in the temple because he heard they were going to kill him. What about us? Are they going to kill us? You know, why don't we go to the temple? Where are we going to hide at? That's a good point. Very good point. Any thoughts? All right, look at verse 13 there. So he makes the point there. For this reason, he was hired, the fellow who was the informer, okay? For this reason he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way and sin, so that they might have cause for an evil report, and that they might reproach me. So notice the way Nehemiah views what this fellow was offering or encouraging him to do. He said that I should be afraid and act that way in what? Sin. Okay. How would have hiding in the temple been considered in Nehemiah's mind as sin?
It was a place that was forbidden for him.
Okay.
Lack of faith in God.
Especially depending on what part of the temple. That's exactly right.
God says, do not fear those who...
All right. We also see here in this lack of faith in God. This Nehemiah would be fearing someone else and putting God's work aside because he feared what the opposition would do. And why start now? I mean, look at all the attempts they've made through this time period. Yeah, it would have been a sin for him to have done that. So that they might have cause for an evil report. Because you then think about it. They could then say, hey, guess what? Nehemiah, he didn't have enough faith in God, in his God. Nehemiah went and hid in the temple because he was fearful. Where's the faith in God now? I mean, it would have easily been turned on them that they might reproach me.
The country, people always look to the leadership to see, in a family, if a dad lets a family go haywire, they look at the father and say, look at the problems that you've caused. In the church, we have a perfect leader. They can't come against them, come against Christ. But even David brought reproach upon the nation. They look to that leadership, and if that leadership falters at all whatsoever, then they make fun of the whole.
And there are some people who will not think twice about trying to trick someone into doing something that is contrary to their faith, and then turning around and rubbing their noses in it, so to speak, that they were willing to go against their faith. And so, now this is a little bit off the subject, but in the case in point of the woman that was caught in adultery, some scholars speculate that she very well, although that may have been her profession, they speculate she may have been set up. Some scholars suggest that instead of the Pharisees just happening, they're having their little meeting and they bring this woman who's been caught in adultery. Well, let's go see what Christ has to say about, or Jesus has to say about this. Some scholars suggest that they set it up, that they had a man approach her, get her into that compromising position, then take her to Jesus and set him up, ultimately set him up there. If that happened that way, then it'd be just like this. They used that woman. Not saying that she was innocent, because she still let herself get into that situation there, but their ulterior motives was to test Christ. Their ulterior motives here was to hinder Nehemiah. And you might say their ulterior motives were to hinder Jesus in his teaching, But anyway, just doesn't really relate to it, but it is kind of similar in the way sometimes our oppositions, our opponents, will try to get us to break our own faith and then hold it against us that we do. All right, any other thoughts? All right, let's see. I should have had... Gene, go ahead and read for us verse 14. We need to look at that one real quick, and then we'll...
My God, think thou upon Tobiah and Sanballat according to these their works, and on the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets, that would have put me in fear.
Okay. Let's talk about this for just a moment here. This is again part of Nehemiah's prayer. All of this Nehemiah is telling what has happened, and he talks about his prayers unto the Lord throughout this process here. So he says, my God, remember these two. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, according to the things that they've done. And he brings in this person, this prophetess, by the name Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid. This opens up a little bit more to the story, doesn't it? It wasn't simply the informer, but he very well may have had these people on his side. Maybe the informer brought in the prophetess Noadiah. Maybe the informer brought in other prophets who backed up what he said, who were confirming him. Now, just because an individual called themselves a prophet, did that mean that they were a prophet of God? No. 2 Peter, and this is a little bit aside from the point, but if you'll notice over in 2 Peter let's actually start at the end of chapter 1. But in 2 Peter, at the end of chapter 1, let me go, I don't want to lose my place. Okay. The end of chapter 1 of 2 Peter, he makes the point there, verse 19, that we have the prophetic word made more sure, which we do well to heed. Verse 20, knowing this verse, that no prophecy of scriptures of any private interpretation, for prophecy never came by the will of man, but holy men of God spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. But there were also false prophets among the people, Peter says. That even during the days of the prophets who were prophesying the coming of the Messiah, there were false prophets as well, who were claiming to speak on God's behalf. Now, Moses gave us a litmus test, and I don't recall the passage right offhand. I'll need to look that up. But Moses gave essentially a litmus test to the people as to determine whether or not they would know that a man is truly a prophet of God. Robin?
Deuteronomy 18:22.
Notice over in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 22, he says, when a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord. Now, you would think about this for a minute. If this thing does not happen or come to pass, that is, the thing which the Lord has not spoken, the prophet has spoken it presumptuously, you shall not be afraid of him. Now, the litmus test that is often used today is someone will prophesy something and it happens. I tell you what, if you were to stand up here and make 200 prophecies regarding the presidential election, or regarding this or regarding that, I could say, today I was told by the Lord that Mitt Romney will be the opponent against Obama. And then the next day, the Lord told me there's going to be Santorum. And then the next day, no matter who it is, Obama's going to win. And then the next day, no matter who it is, Sanatorium, or Sanatorium, you get the point there, will win. Okay. Then the election comes to pass. I'm bound to get one of those things right. And I say, look, I'm a prophet of God. What I said was right. There's the litmus test, people look at. Well, he predicted it, therefore he must be a prophet. But the litmus test is completely opposite. If he says something and it does not come to pass, then you know that he is not a prophet of God. Which meant that everything that a prophet of God said came to pass. Everything that God told to a prophet would come to pass. And so if a prophet predicted something and it failed to happen, then he spoke without the Lord's divine assistance. Any thoughts? And it's something to think about, because you'll have a lot of people today, the way they look at it is completely opposite of this. You know, think about all the Nostradamus prophecies. Well, it looks like he predicted this, so he had to have been a prophet. But the law of statistics, I think is the right term, statistics there, if you make enough guesses, you're bound to get it right. You know, so. All right, any thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if sometimes a prophet might know what's going to happen, but not necessarily be right in everything. Like when Agabus knew that Paul was going to be arrested and your hands are going to be bound. He might know that's happening, but Paul says, well, why are you crying about it? You know, just because you know something doesn't necessarily mean you take the right action on it.
Because in that case, it was going to happen. Think about Jonah. Jonah was supposed to go to Nineveh. God told him to go. But Jonah ran. Paul knew that he was supposed to go to Rome. I mean, the Lord had already said this is what was going to happen. And so why be sad about it? Why be upset? It's going to, you know. Any other thoughts? I'm hesitating a little bit because I was thinking about the case of Balaam. You know, the story of Balaam there. At the end of the story of Balaam, he was against Israel. He was prophesying doom against Israel. He was a prophet for other people who were against Israel. But for a short time, Balak. But for a short time, he did the work of the Lord by prophesying for Israel against Balak. Yeah. All right, any thoughts? Okay, let's see. Let's come back. And
that took divine intervention, though, for him to actually prophesy the right way, because God stopped him.
All right, therein is the key. Yeah. That's exactly right. You could even have a good prophet, another great...
the young prophet.
Yeah, exactly. Think about the story of the young prophet. The older prophet, for whatever reason, he had enough history there to be considered a prophet. Okay? He gave a false message, which ended up... Well, he gave two messages, didn't he? The first message was, an angel of the Lord told me you need to come and eat at my house. Then the next message was, you're not going to make it home, you're going to die.
That's the real message.
That was the real message, exactly. So it's very possible for there to have been a prophet who at times before had spoken by God's direction, but now does not. And therefore the things that he puts forth is false. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts? All right, let's come back to chapter 6 now of Nehemiah, and let's see. Let's come down to verse 15 there. And let's see, Miss Betty, would you read for us, beginning in verse 15, and let's do 15 and 16, please.
So the wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. And it happened when all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations around us saw these things, that they were very disheartened in our eyes, for they perceived that this work was done by our God.
Okay, let's look at this for just a moment here. He makes the point that the wall was finished on the 25th day of which month?
Elul.
Elul. Probably the 6th month, maybe around August to September. 6th month on whose calendar, by the way? It would have been the Jewish calendar, exactly. And so in 52 days, they completed it. Now, 51. Not 51, you're right. Well, it would have been 51 had Nehemiah hid out in the temple, but no. No, that's not right. Never mind. But yeah, 52 days there. And in verse 16, and it happened when all of our enemies heard it, and they saw what had been completed there, that they were what? Disheartened. Because despite all their best attempts and efforts, they failed. They could not stall the people. They could not slow the building of it down. They could not prevent it. And this had to drive them crazy. Because this was, from their perspective, a small band of religious fanatics who were set about to get this done. Surely we could stop them. But it was their faith in God that allowed them to complete the task. Any thoughts?
In a warped way, that's how it is today.
Well, that's
and
true.
We feel so helpless and so beaten up by the world when they just we're fanatical to them. And it sometimes I feel a little beaten up, like everybody's just taken over. That like sin is winning.
Right. It's sometimes, and it just depends on how much we allow others and those of the world to get to us. And the more we allow them to get to us, the less we work for the Lord, the less productive, the more we see the lack of production, and the more disheartened we become. And we take our eyes off of Him.
So this is a great lesson.
Absolutely. For all of us, yeah. Miss Doris.
That's when we need to go back to the Bible and read through it again.
That's right. That's right.
And pray a lot.
Those two things. Prayer is talking to God. The Bible is Him talking to you. Yeah. Gene.
Yep. Your example a minute ago, when people let the world get to them, then they fall away from the truth.
Right.
I'd suggest to you that action should be reversed.
Interesting
when
point.
we fall away from God, then the world gets to us.
That's a good point. Our faith can be tested by the world.
Yeah.
But when we begin to lose that faith, a little bit, even just a little bit,
Just say maybe.
Exactly, just saying maybe, then we find ourselves in the way of the world, and our faith is separate from God. I've said this before. There's an example I know years ago where this member of the church, he led singing, he gave the Wednesday night talk and so forth. One Sunday morning, he said to his wife, "I'm not going back." And as far as I know, to this day, he's not going back. Now, if they travel, he will take her to services, but he won't go back. Now, was he faithful, and woke up that morning and said, "Hey, I'm not faithful anymore"? No. Something happened in the past, could have been weeks, could have been months, could have been years, that finally culminated with him admitting that he was not faithful to the Lord and was not interested in being faithful.
Pat, this is where years come in. Pretty soon you don't care what the people say.
I don't know. I think I'll always care what they say.
But we have to work, just like these people. They didn't stop until the temple, till the walls were completed, and we must not stop either. Yeah. Any other thoughts? All right, let's look at the last two verses here. Miss Florence, if you would read for us there last three, 17 through 18, please.
Moreover, in those days the nobles of Judah sent many letters unto Tobiah. The letter of Tobiah came unto them. For there were many in Judah sworn unto him, because he was the son of Jeconiah, the son of Arah, and his son Johanna had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berchiah. Also they reported his good deeds before me, and uttered my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to put me in fear.
Okay. It's as if Nehemiah adds just a few little final thoughts here, just to kind of explain a couple of things. In those days, you have the nobles of Judah. They sent letters to Tobiah. They still had a communication. We may ask the question, how did Sanballat and Tobiah know the progress that was being made? Well, it could be because there were communications going on between some of the nobles. And so they would write to Tobiah. Tobiah would write to them. And the reason for that is found there in verse 18. For many in Judah were pledged to him. And the reason is basically because of marriage there. Because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arah, and his son Johanna, who had married the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah. There was a family connection of sorts. But he was outside of the camp, you might say. He was not a part of these people. He had no part in it, although he might have been related to them through marriage there. But in the course of them writing these letters, also they reported his good deeds before me, and reported my words to him. it's almost, if I'm reading that right, it's almost as if what he's saying there is that they, some of them maybe spoke up to Nehemiah on his behalf. Tobiah's not that bad of a person. He's got good intentions. He's just worried about us. You can imagine some sort of things like that. And they would report my words to him. So it was a dialogue between them. And Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. He would use what they said to him as a means of constructing letters in hopes of being able to frighten Nehemiah. All right, any thoughts? Miss Pat?
Satan never rests, does he? He's always trying to thwart God's plan.
Well, that's right. He never takes a break, you might say. He's always in effort.
He's vigilant.
And the thing is, we oftentimes talk about the devil goes about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And it very well that it may be possible that in manners and means that we are not able to perceive, he's walking around us, maybe he's looking over our shoulder and whispering into our ears to look over there. I don't believe that, okay? But the methods that he uses are quite simple. They are the people who don't serve God. It's the things, not everything of the world is wrong. The beautiful mountains in North Georgia and Tennessee, there's nothing wrong with those mountains. They're very beautiful. But if I listen to people who would have me abandon my worship to God in order to go and enjoy the pleasures and so forth, well, it's the ways and the means that the devil works. No different back here. No different. The devil did not have his hand directly into getting these people to thwart Nehemiah. They did it of their own accord. But in the end, they were working, in a sense, for the devil, in that they were trying to thwart the effort of God. And it would be nice if everybody who was trying to get us to turn away from God wore, Dante's pictures of the devil with red and a pitchfork and everything, because then we could identify it. But it doesn't work that way. We have to look at actions and intent and offerings and decide to turn away.
Wouldn't that be nice if he stepped up in front of us and said, I'm the devil?
Oh,
How
yeah.
much easier it would be.
Hey, absolutely. It's like little commercials that, you have the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder telling you what to do and everything. It'd be nice if you could see that in the mirror, because you could go thump them off there. But it doesn't work that way, though.
You didn't recognize him.
Yeah. Any other comments about this?
I would like to have a pail of water if he was standing close to me.
Put his fire out.
Well, Jesus said something about giving a cup of cold water in his name.
That's right.
There is a story.
Yeah.
It was an elderly lady, wasn't she?
She lived in a nursing home, and the gentleman who sat across from her at lunchtime every day just continually used foul language. And she finally had enough, and she threw her whole glass of water on him and told him in his name it's given. She put out. She was mad, and they called her daughter in and said, she's throwing water at people. And she said, well, we need to speak better.
Now his fire.
Yeah.
I have a question. Could we compare verse 16, when it came to pass, then all the enemies heard, and they became they, down in their own eyes. Couldn't we kind of compare that to when the nations bring it to Gamaliel, and he says if it's not of God, it won't matter. But if it's of God, you better stop and listen to it. When kind of because God was with this, and that's why these people were scared. God was with the church.
That's right.
And still is. And people are they don't understand us. We're a small group of people, and yet they could set the world on fire back then as far as turn it upside down and everything. And that's what we need to be doing today.
That's right. If it's from God, we can't stop it.
Yeah.
That was his point.
And that was the reason they couldn't stop them.
That's right. And if we are from God, we cannot be stopped. The other side of that works.
And the people that want to stop you are those who you're trying to convert over to God. They don't want change. They don't like change, and they're not going.
That's right.
And so they battle. It's a battle.
Exactly. It's ongoing. Let's do the questions real quick. I don't want to wait until we resume in the fall to do the questions for chapter 6. Where did Sanballat and Geshem ask to meet Nehemiah?
Oh no.
Yeah, they're in the plains of Ono.
He said, oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
Number 2, what accusation did Sanballat make against Nehemiah and the Jews?
They were trying to set up their own kingdom.
Yeah, basically setting up your own kingdom. You're rebelling. You want to be the king. They want you to be the king. That was the accusation. Who did Nehemiah say there in question number 3 was that secret informer? Yeah, it's verse 10 there, and there's a couple names there, so it's easy to kind of get lost in that. But notice there, what's that? Notice, yeah, afterward I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Mehetabel. So Shemaiah is the answer there. Okay. Shemaiah was the secret informer there. All right, number 4 there. We have here Nehemiah praying. He says, my God, remember what? Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these their works, and the prophetess, Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who have made me afraid. Number 5, on what day was the wall finished? The 25th day of Elul, 52 days there. Number 6, how did the enemies of the Jews react when they heard that the walls were completed?
They were downtrodden.
That's right, they were disheartened, they were downtrodden, they were depressed. Number 7, Tobiah was the son-in-law of whom? Yeah, look at that verse 18. For many of Judah were pledged to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah. And then number 8, why did Tobiah send letters to Nehemiah? To frighten him. Exactly, to frighten him. Alrighty, well, we'll go ahead and...
Now, let me back up.
Yes, Gene, go right ahead.
When you're reading your question number 4,
Yes.
let's see. Well, I think you dropped the word would. You said, who had made me afraid? I said, the way you wrote it, who would have made me afraid?
Yes. Well, that's from the New King James translation.
I know, but I mean, when you read the question,
I skipped it.
You dropped one of the words.
That's a good
Changed
point.
The whole meaning of the sentence.
That's a very good point. And the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid, not who have made me afraid. Good point. Very good point.
Try.
Exactly. Made the attempt. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay.
I can see why we're waiting until Paul. There's 73 verses in chapter 7.
Yeah, it's and they're all names. Look at that.
Oh, Doris, you better practice all summer. What? On chapter
7.
To name everybody.
Well,
7?
Chapter 7 has a lot of names in it. I really appreciate all your participation and your willingness to come out to the class. We will start with the second Tuesday after Labor Day. Is that what comes up in the fall? I think that's right there. Yes, ma'am.
I called Miss Coker yesterday, and she's not doing well at all. She's in lots of pain.
Really?
And she can't get to the doctor until Thursday.
Okay.
She's severe.
Keep cladding Sister Coker in our minds and prayers. Still having a lot of difficulties with that, with what she's facing there with that. Definitely keep her in our prayers, as well as others, Miss Maxine. And
Maxine was doing much better yesterday.
that's good. Okay, that's good to hear. Any other thoughts? We appreciate those who have been able to join us online. Keep your Tuesday spot available because we'll start back up in the fall and we'll continue our study through Nehemiah. We'll probably do a study of Esther after Nehemiah just to kind of pull that story because it's within the same time frame that we've been studying. We'll look at that after we do Nehemiah in the fall. All right. Appreciate all the participation and comments. Let's go ahead and be dismissed in a word of prayer. And Dale, would you mind directing our minds?
Our most loving Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that we can come together to study Thy Word without fear of persecution, to be an encouragement to one another. We're thankful for John and for his willingness to prepare. And we ask, Father, that as we go throughout our lives, that we might always give You the praise and glory and not bring any shame or reproach upon Thee or upon the church. We ask, Father, that You'd be with those of our members who have physical ailments. And we know of our Sister Claudine Coker, our Sister Maxine Light, Sister Linda Hutchison, Sharon Nia, our Sister Beth Arnhart,
And there may be others also that we are asking for your help, that they might be restored to a measure of their health, that they can continue to serve thee as they've done so in the past. We ask also, Father, that you'd use us as your instruments to reach out and help them in any way that we can. And we ask that you would help us to look for opportunities to teach and encourage others that they might know the joys of being a Christian before it's everlasting too late. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen.